Chapter 3 deals with social, moral, and emotional development. I want to remind you that in the other chapters, we learned about Piaget and Vygotsky and their cognitive theories of development. You are going to notice that Piaget also has a moral development theory. We're going to be talking about Erikson's stages, the implications and criticisms of Erikson's theory. We are also going to talk about Kohlberg and the criticisms. What's really important for all of you in here is to look at the social and emotional development during the preschool years, the elementary years, and the middle and high school years. It is going to show you the different characteristics of each child at those different levels. I've gone ahead and highlighted pages in the chapters already, so you can follow with me. I want to make sure you can understand, along with this discussion, that there is a PowerPoint that goes along with this chapter on Moodle with the highlights there. Let's go ahead and talk about why it's important that teachers understand the personal and social development and why this is important for you as a teacher. Remember, we talked about the very first time we met about effective teaching, and it's a whole lot more of just transferring information. Effective teachers have to address the whole child, which is the emotional and social development of these children, as well as the cognitive development of these children. The very first theory we will be discussing is Erikson's, as well as Piaget. Erikson and Piaget had stages of development, and Erikson's stages are all centered around crisis. He states that every human being has certain crises to face, and if we don't face these crises at the appropriate, what he feels appropriate time, that we go through life constantly trying to go back and resolve these crises. Hence the identity crisis and things of this nature. If you don't act the right age when you are on that age, they say you will go back to that stage. Notice the green button next to each stage. You can go back and look at these stages in more detail. We will briefly go through them. The first stage Erikson has is called trust versus mistrust, and this is from birth to 18 months old. If you remember or have been around a small child, you notice that when they are infants, they'll go with anybody. But as they get older, they begin to question the trust level. There's research out there that states that children who are abandoned at a young age or rejected have trust issues. And again, Erikson's stage, you can always go to the next stage, but some people in their adult ages still have trust issues, and they go from there. In stage 2, the autonomy versus doubt stage, it's usually when a child hits the ages of about 18 months or 2 to 3 years. They begin talking about the terrible twos. This stage for Erikson, you need to read very carefully and you need to go through because there's a reason why our 2-year-olds act the way they do. They start having independence and they want to do things on their own. They may throw fits when they don't get their way. In stage 3, initiative versus guilt, this stage is 3 to 6 years old. They begin to learn the language skills and they begin learning, getting a sense of that they are convinced that they want to do things by themselves. This, you may try to pick them up and put them on the chair and they'll say, no, I want to do it by myself. Parents have to allow children at this age to experiment and try to get dressed on their own, climb the slide, and do things more independently. Because if you don't allow children to experience this stage, they begin feeling that they'll never be good at anything, and they may not feel confident later in life. Stage 4 is industry versus inferiority. This is ages 6 to 12 years. It's a big part of the child's social goals. Teachers in schools, their peers in school have a really big influence. This is when parents' influences decrease. Elementary majors, early childhood majors, this is a wonderful stage where your children, your students, will want to please you. Middle and high school changes a little bit. They are no longer less concerned about pleasing you, but the younger children want to do things correctly because the teacher tells them to. Stage 5 deals with identity versus role confusion, and this is 12 to 18. It is thought that at this age, you try to figure out who you are. And notice the age of 12, that's when they start middle school, and that's why we have a lot of middle school issues because they are not quite sure what group they want to belong to. They're changing, they're trying to find a new identity. They don't necessarily want to mimic their parents. They want to be like their friends, but they're not quite sure which group to belong to. So we go through that stage. Stage 6 deals with intimacy versus isolation. It's at this stage that people start seeking relationships. It says that if you don't have a successful relationship, or if you continue to fail in relationships, then these people experience and may retreat into isolation. And when they say relationships, it doesn't necessarily have to be partners or marriage. It can be anything like friendships. It doesn't always have to be things that we think of as relationship, as marriages. The next one is stage 7, generativity versus self-absorption. This is middle adulthood. It's the idea of passing down to children what you once had. Now it's giving to someone else. People in this stage usually tend to hand down things to their children. You want to establish certain rights and morals, decisions into the next generation. This last stage, no one will ever have to face this when in teaching. You shouldn't have to teach this. Integrity versus despair is very late in adulthood when people look back in their lives and decide, did I do what I hoped to have done? Did I fail? Did I put limitations on myself? Was my life worth it? Type thing. And so most of you in the classroom setting won't reach this stage in the classroom setting. And here are criticisms of Erikson's theory. Erikson's theory did emphasize the role of the environment. It's a lot of outside play. It's the way society deals with us. It's how we deal with society. It goes through and it says that as we go through life, we do face with these crises, but he doesn't explain. Critics say he doesn't explain why. Why do we go through these stages? And why we feel like at 60 we have to go back and act like we're 17. He says there's something missing. Like at 17, we didn't address those issues at that time. And that's why we call that the identity crisis, when we see older people trying to act like they were young. The next person we are going to talk about is Piaget, sorry about that. Don't be confused because Piaget also had in chapter 2, we talked about Piaget's cognitive development, and he went through the 4 stages: sensory motor, the operational, and all of those stages. This theory right here, Piaget's theory of moral development, deals with morally how we develop. And of course, Piaget says we have to go through his cognitive stages first, and then we can develop into his moral stages. His stages are not exactly what you would think of, and they're not spelled out as well as his cognitive stages. He divides them basically into these two, heteronomous and autonomous morality, and he says these two phases basically overlap, and it's basically about following rules. So you may want to read more about this. When he developed his theory, he watched theories and basically said that children at a young age, rules said rules can't be broken. As we get older, rules are adjusted to fit the situation. I think this chart here does a really good job of showing the different characteristics of both stages. You can go through and look at this in more detail. He does say that there is a time where these stages do overlap. You might want to concentrate on this. Piaget's details are written here on page 53. He kind of coincides his stages with cognitive development and the formal, operational, pre-operational, and all these other stages. Read more carefully about the rules and how we change. He believes that children have to resolve their own conflicts because you are going to have to make some decisions morally. Rules are out there, but sometimes they are changeable, and sometimes they're out there just for the purpose of keeping law and order. But with consent, mutual consent, these rules can be changed.